I've been through a lot in my 61 years on this earth. I buried my husband. I raised 2 daughters on my own. I worked double shifts at a hospital for 15 years, just to keep the lights on. I thought nothing could break me, but I never, not once, imagined that the most humiliating moment of my life would happen at my own dinner table, in my own home, on a Sunday evening, when my son-in-law picked up a glass of whiskey and threw it straight at me because I told him he'd had enough to drink. And I want you to stay with me until the end of this story. Because what happened after that night, it was something none of us saw coming.
My name is Carol. I live in a mid-sized town in Ohio, the kind of place where everybody knows your business before you do. I've got 2 daughters, Michelle and Dana. Michelle is 34. Dana is 30. They're my whole world. Always have been. When their father, Richard, passed away from a heart attack 12 years ago, those girls and I pulled together in a way that still makes me emotional to this day. We cried together, we grieved together, and then we picked ourselves up and kept moving, because that's what Richard would have wanted. Michelle, my oldest, she's always been the responsible one. Straight A student. Nursing degree. Works at the same hospital where I used to work, actually. She's got a good heart, maybe too good sometimes. That's always been her problem. She sees the best in people even when the evidence is pointing the other direction. About 5 years ago, she met a man named Derek at a friend's birthday party. He was charming, I'll give him that. Tall, broad shoulders, big smile, the kind of guy who walks into a room and immediately starts working it. He sold insurance, drove a nice truck, and talked a lot about his big plans for the future. I liked him okay at first. He was polite to me, brought flowers on holidays, called me Miss Carol, which felt respectful. Michelle was glowing. And after everything she'd been through, watching her father die, putting herself through nursing school, I just wanted her to be happy. They got married 3 years ago. Small ceremony in my backyard. It was a beautiful day. I cried the whole time. But even at that wedding, something tugged at me. Just a little. Just enough to notice. Derek had a flask in his jacket pocket. I saw him sneak sips between photos. I told myself it was nerves. I told myself every groom gets nervous. I told myself a lot of things over those years. And I was wrong about most of them. The first year of their marriage looked fine on the outside. They bought a house about 20 minutes from me. Michelle kept working. Derek switched jobs twice, said both companies were poorly managed, said his bosses didn't respect his ideas. There was always a reason. Always someone else's fault. I started noticing things. Small things at first. When they'd come over for dinner, Derek would always head straight to my liquor cabinet like it was his own personal bar. I didn't say anything. I figured it was just his way of relaxing. But then it was 2 drinks before dinner. Then 3. Then he'd get louder, more opinionated, more domineering. He'd talk over Michelle. He'd interrupt my sentences. Once, he actually told me, laughing like it was a joke, that I made my pot roast. Wrong. Michelle would get this look on her face. I know that look. I wore that look myself once or twice in my own marriage when I was trying to manage a moment quietly. It's the look of a woman who's working very hard to keep everything from falling apart in public. I pulled Michelle aside one evening about a year into their marriage. I said, "Baby, how are things really going?" She smiled that rehearsed smile and said, "Mom, we're fine. Derek just has a big personality." Big personality. That's what she called it. I let it go. Because she's my daughter, not my child to control. She's a grown woman and she gets to make her own choices. But I kept my eyes open. Then about 8 months ago, something shifted. Derek lost his 3rd job. He said the economy was rough, said the market was tough, said he was exploring options. But Michelle told me in a quiet phone call one Tuesday afternoon that he'd actually been let go for showing up late repeatedly. She said it like she was confessing something shameful, like it was somehow her failure too. That's when I started really worrying. He started drinking earlier in the day. Michelle mentioned it casually, like she was commenting on weather. Derek's been stressed, so he's been unwinding earlier. Unwinding. At noon. On a Tuesday. And every time they came to my house, the drinking got heavier. I started keeping track, not in a nosy way, just in a concerned mother way. 3 whiskeys before we even sat down to eat. For sometimes. He'd get belligerent, argumentative. He'd pick fights about politics, about sports, about nothing. Michelle would shrink. Just get smaller and smaller in her chair. But I still didn't know how bad it actually was at home. Not yet. That was coming. It was a Sunday in March. Cold outside, one of those gray Ohio days where the sky just sits on top of you like a wet blanket. I made a big dinner, pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, rolls. Comfort food. The kind of meal that says I love you without words. Dana was there too with her boyfriend, Marcus. We were all around my dining room table, and for the first 20 minutes, everything seemed okay. Derek had already had 2 whiskeys before dinner. I'd watched him pour them in the kitchen. Big pours, none of that one-finger business. Real drinks. By the time we sat down, his eyes had that glassy, half-focused look I'd come to dread. But he was laughing, telling a story about some golf game, and Michelle was laughing along, and I thought, okay. Maybe tonight will be fine. It was not fine. About halfway through dinner, Derek held up his empty glass toward me, held it up like I was a waitress, and said, "Miss Carroll, hit me again." Now, I want to be clear. The whiskey bottle was sitting right there on the sideboard. Literally 6 feet from where he was sitting. He could have gotten up and poured it himself. But he held that glass out to me like it was my job. Something in me had just had enough. Quietly, calmly, I said, "Derek, I think you've had plenty. Why don't you have some water? We've got a nice meal here." The table went silent. Michelle's fork stopped moving. Dana looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at his plate. Derek put the glass down slowly. He smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. It was the kind of smile that has something cold behind it. "Excuse me?" he said. "I just think some water would be good," I said, keeping my voice even, keeping it calm. "You've had a couple already, Derek. There's no need for more. I don't recall asking for your opinion on what I need," he said. "Derek," Michelle started. "I'm talking to your mother," he snapped at her. Just like that. Like she was nothing. I looked at him steadily. I said, "This is my home, Derek. And I'm asking you, politely, to drink some water." What happened next? I still see it in slow motion sometimes when I close my eyes at night. He picked up that glass, that heavy crystal whiskey glass that had belonged to my mother, and he threw it. Not at the wall. Not across the room. At me. It hit the edge of the table in front of me and shattered. A shard caught my forearm and opened up a small cut. Whiskey and ice splattered across my blouse, across the green beans, across my mother's white tablecloth. The room went dead silent. And then Dana screamed out. I didn't cry. I want you to know that. I did not cry in front of him. I pressed a dinner napkin to my arm. I looked at Derek, who had gone pale. I think even he was shocked at what he'd just done, and I said, very quietly, "I want you out of my house. Right now." Marcus stood up. He's a big man, Marcus. 6'2". He said, "Derek, you need to go." Derek started saying it was an accident, that he didn't mean for it to go that way, that he was sorry, that he just lost his grip on the glass. Lost his grip. On a glass he threw. Michelle was shaking. Not crying, shaking. Like her whole body had gone into some kind of shock. And something about seeing my daughter sit there at my dinner table shaking, while her husband made excuses, that broke something open in me that I'd been holding closed for a long time. They left. Derek first, then Michelle, who hugged me at the door so tight I could feel her whole body trembling. She whispered, "I'm so sorry, Mom." And I thought my heart would split clean in half. Because she was apologizing. For him. Still protecting him. Even then. After they left, Dana helped me clean up. She was furious, shaking with it. Marcus sat in the kitchen and didn't say much, just stayed close. I think he knew I needed people nearby. That night, after they were all gone, I sat alone at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and a bandaged arm, and I cried. Really cried. Not for myself. The cut was nothing, the blouse was nothing, even my grandmother's tablecloth was nothing. I cried for Michelle. I cried because I understood in that moment that what I'd witnessed at my dinner table was not a single incident. It was a glimpse of what was happening behind closed doors. And I was terrified of what else I didn't know. The next morning, I called Michelle. She didn't answer. I called 3 more times throughout the day. Nothing. Dana called her too, nothing. By Tuesday, I was sick with worry. I drove to their house. Derek's truck was gone. I knocked and Michelle opened the door, and she looked exhausted. Wrung out. Like she hadn't slept in 2 days. I didn't lecture her. I didn't say, "I told you so." I just held her. Right there in the doorway, I just held my daughter. And she finally broke. She told me everything. The drinking had been bad for over a year. He'd never thrown anything at her, but he'd put his fist through a wall once. He'd screamed at her until she locked herself in the bathroom. He'd gone through their savings, almost all of it, on alcohol and online gambling that she'd only just discovered. He'd borrowed money from 2 of his friends and told her it was for business investments. It wasn't. She'd been covering for him. Making excuses? Holding the whole thing together with her bare hands while he dismantled everything around her. I took a breath. And then I went into what I privately call mother mode. I called my attorney that same afternoon, a woman named Patricia who I've known for 20 years. I asked her what Michelle's options were and what we needed to document. She walked me through everything. I helped Michelle open a private bank account. I helped her start quietly gathering financial records. I connected her with a therapist, one she'd been resisting for months, afraid Derek would find out. And I told her, gently but clearly, "Baby, that man put a glass through the air at your mother. You were sitting at that table. You're done protecting him. It's time." She nodded. For the first time in a long time, she looked like herself. Here's where the story gets interesting. Derek had apparently been telling people, friends, his family, mutual acquaintances, that I had provoked him at dinner. That I'd been interfering in their marriage for years, and that the incident with the glass was an accident that got blown out of proportion by an overbearing mother-in-law. He actually called my sister and told her that version of the story. My sister Roberta, who then called me asking what on earth was going on. What Derek didn't know was that Dana's boyfriend Marcus had recorded part of the dinner on his phone. He'd started filming because we'd been talking about something funny that happened earlier, and he just never stopped. He got the whole thing on video. Derek holding the glass out, my response, Derek's reaction, the throw. All of it. Marcus hadn't said a word about it that night. He's a quiet man who thinks before he speaks. But when Derek started spreading his version of events, Marcus sent that video to Michelle. And Michelle forwarded it to Patricia, our attorney. Derek also didn't know that 2 of the friends he'd borrowed money from had already started asking questions. One of them had hired an attorney of his own. And his most recent employer, the job he'd been fired from, had filed a report with their HR department noting that Derek had come to work impaired twice before his termination. That report existed. It was documented. Everything started unraveling at once. Michelle filed for divorce 6 weeks after that Sunday dinner. Derek was served at his favorite sports bar on a Thursday afternoon, according to the process server, who told Patricia he looked genuinely stunned, like it had never occurred to him that there would actually be consequences. The video came out in the legal proceedings. It was an accident. Story collapsed completely. His own family, his mother and his brother, reached out to Michelle privately to apologize. His mother actually called me. She cried on the phone and told me she'd known for years that Derek had a problem and that she was ashamed it had come to this. I didn't have the heart to be angry with her. She sounded like a woman who'd been carrying her own quiet grief for a long time. Derek's friends stopped taking his calls. The insurance industry is a small world in Ohio, and word gets around. The borrowing, the behavior, the video, it all accumulated. Last I heard, he's living in a rented room and attending a court-mandated alcohol program as part of the divorce agreement. Michelle moved back into her old bedroom for 2 months while the divorce was being finalized. Those 2 months were something I will treasure for the rest of my life. We stayed up late talking the way we used to when she was in high school. We cooked together. We cried sometimes. We laughed too, surprising ourselves with it. Dana came over most weekends and the three of us would sit on my back porch in the evenings with cups of tea, and it felt like something had been restored. Like we'd found each other again after a long time apart. Michelle is in her own apartment now. She's back to being herself, sharp, warm, funny, strong. Her therapist says she's doing exceptional work. She's been promoted at the hospital. She's taking a pottery class on Thursday evenings, which is the most Michelle thing I've ever heard, and I love it completely. She called me last week just to say, "Mom, I feel like me again." And I had to sit down because my knees went weak with relief. There's something I've been thinking about a lot since that Sunday dinner. Something that keeps coming back to me. That glass Derek threw? It didn't break me. It broke the silence. It broke the wall of careful pretending that had been holding a bad situation together for years. Sometimes the worst moment is actually the moment that saves everything. I also think about what I almost did, which was say nothing. Because I'd said nothing so many times before. I'd swallowed my worry and smiled and refilled glasses and told myself it wasn't my place. But it was my house. And she is my daughter. And sometimes love means speaking up even when it's uncomfortable. Even when it costs you something. The glass shattered on my dining room table and it cut my arm and ruined my blouse. But it also cut through years of silence. And what grew back in that space was something real. If you're watching this and you recognize something in this story, something familiar in the excuses, in the silence, in the careful management of someone else's behavior, please know, you don't have to wait for a glass to be thrown. You're allowed to speak up sooner. You're allowed to ask for help. You're allowed to be done. And if you're a mother watching this, trust your gut. You almost always know before you let yourself know. Take care of yourselves. And I'll see you in the next one.